Breaking tonight, President Trump wrapping up the first day of his historic trip abroad with Saudi Arabia laying out the red carpet. Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. President Trump now hours away from what many predict will be an historic speech in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia on terror, which will be a significant break from the prior administration. Today, after a series of banquets, receptions, and ceremonies, the president, who was awarded Saudi Arabia's highest civilian honor, signed an historic $110 billion arms deal with Saudi King Salman, solidifying the alliance between the United States and Muslim Saudi Arabia. And for all of you who think that President Trump is a Muslim hater, Saudi Arabia, the most religious Muslim nation in the world, home to some of the holiest Muslim sites, is showing our leader the respect, honor, and dignity that we haven't seen given to an American president in years. Joining me now with more on this historic trip and the next speech tomorrow is Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway. Good evening, Kellyanne.
Good evening, Jeanine.
All right. Well, quite a reception that the President has gotten, a lavish welcome, banquets, ceremonies, dances. What does this say about America and Saudi Arabia and the Muslim world?
It's a historic trip, Jeanine. As you know, most presidents go to Canada or Mexico first. This president has decided to embark on a 5-stop, 8-day trip. And he begins in the seat of the Muslim world, where many of the most important monuments, if you will, or holy places in the Muslim religion are in this country. Tomorrow, he'll deliver an historic speech in front of those who are representing 50 Muslim countries. And he will really call to action everyone to come together in unity to defeat terrorism and extremism. And you see the reception he got today from these leaders, and these are people who want to cooperate. This deal that was done today, when it's finished, $110 billion arms deal, the largest of its kind in United States history. This helps Saudi Arabia to push back extremism and terrorism as well. They're certainly facing that there. We know Iran is a threat to everyone, including our neighbor Israel, our friend Israel. And of course, the president, when he leaves Saudi Arabia, will go on to Israel, will go on to the Vatican, will go on to Sicily, to the G7, and of course, NATO in Brussels. So it's a historic trip that starts here, and it's not just symbolic, it's substantive. Because these investments that were made today, as Secretary of State Rex Tillerson noted as well, these are investments in American jobs, American infrastructure, and the idea that you've got the media on this side, this side of the Atlantic Ocean, arguing about whether the president should even remain in office is so ridiculous when you compare to what he's doing out there as the president of the United States. It doesn't look like anybody there in Saudi Arabia is paying much attention to the nonsense over here.
Well, let me ask you this, Kellyanne. What is the significance of the president on his first international trip selecting Saudi Arabia as his first stop?
Well, it's exactly what I'm saying, that he wants to go right into the heart of the Muslim world and show unity with them in defeating terrorism and pushing back extremism. Every religion wants evil out of its way. Every country wants evil out of its way. And we need to get serious about this. This trip is significant because it reestablishes certainly America's dominance as a global leader, but also we continue to build these relationships with allies around the globe. And we're looking for cooperation in what the president has said from practically day one of his campaign, let alone his presidency, Jeanine, which is we want to push back on those that want the death and destruction of good people. And he's gone to Saudi Arabia also to show unity with these Muslim nations. 50 are expected to be represented tomorrow for this speech.
I understand President el-Sisi and the leaders of many countries are going to be there. So is this signaling a start of a new chapter in the Middle East where the United States is realigning with its former allies? I mean, is this significant in terms of a repudiation of Obama and, you know, the Iran deal?
Well, I haven't heard anyone lately mention President Obama in terms of thinking about this trip, and that tells you something. The only time I've heard him mentioned in the last couple of days is when people on TV who are experts in this field talk about how Saudi Arabia and other such allies had to suffer through 8 years of not showing cooperation, of not really having a strong relationship and cooperation toward defeating terrorism and extremism. It also means that we are looking towards building these relationships and these alliances across the globe, and that we recognize the growing threat of Iran, a country that was delivered pallets of cash during the Obama administration, made a terrible deal that even some Democratic senators like Chuck Schumer and Bob Menendez were critical of.
Right.
Instead, we are talking about Iran now as a leading, if not the leading, state sponsor of terrorism, who's a direct threat to Israel and direct threat to peace-loving people around the globe.
Okay, and what is the significance of the First Lady being on this trip? I mean, you know, she's been in New York with Barron, and now apparently she's with the president now that school is over. But her being with him, what signal does that send?
Well, it's not a signal so much as the substance of it is that we have this brilliant First Lady who's an immigrant herself, who understands the rich diversity of the globe, and who is side by side with her husband on this trip, the President of the United States. She speaks 5 languages. I know everyone's going to focus on how elegant and gorgeous and poised and dignified she is, all of which is true. But we also should look at, you know, who she is in terms of her partnership with her husband, the President of the United States, how influential and important she is to him on a daily basis, and how she's representing this country in such a beautiful and dignified and elegant way on the world stage. We should be very proud that she's the First Lady. And I personally, as a mother of 4 school-age children, think so highly of Mrs. Trump, our First Lady, and putting motherhood first in these first few months of her husband's presidency, saying very publicly that their son needs one of his parents with him at all times, and his father is busy being president of the United States.
All right. Well, one of the things, Kellyanne, that you reference is people talk about how elegant she is. We're going to talk about that later in the show. But let me ask you, tomorrow, what can we expect from the speech? And it's kind of interesting because we had President Obama's first speech. It was his apology for being an American. I suspect it'll be a little different tomorrow from President Trump.
It will be different. You know, we're not there to impose our values and our customs on the rest of the world. America first does not mean America alone. And that will be one of the themes of this speech as well. It's building those relationships and the cooperative attitude, and then indeed the cooperative action together to push back on the growing threats around the globe, including, of course, in the Middle East, and not especially, against radical terrorists and extremism. I mean, this is something the President of the United States believes that all children, Muslim children, Jewish children, Christian children,
right,
atheist children, ought to live in peace and ought to be able to pursue their dreams as well. And you will hear a lot of that tomorrow.
Kellyanne, the last question. We just have a few more seconds. There's a lot of question as to whether he'll use the term Islamic terrorism tomorrow. Do you know?
I won't get ahead of the president's speech. It's been previewed this week to the press as well for those who were interested in being on the calls with senior administration officials. And the previews are very consistent with what I just said tonight. Look, this president has been very clear about his view. And he's also been very clear about his willingness to go to the Middle East and share those views and find some cooperation.
All right. Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Jeanine. Thank you.
And joining me now with more reaction to President Trump's historic trip, Congressman Ron DeSantis, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as House Oversight. All right. Good evening, Congressman. You know, this lavish reception, I mean, dancing and the red carpet and the king almost running down the red carpet when the president landed. You know, when you juxtapose that against the reception of President Barack Obama, of which there was really none, you have to draw some conclusions. What conclusions do you draw?
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. It's like Trump Tower Sandbox edition, very extravagant. And I think that the conclusion that you draw is Gulf states like Saudi Arabia being the most prominent realize that Iran has gained a huge amount of power over the last 8 years. They see the disaster of the nuclear deal and all the money that's gone into Iran. Iran is wreaking havoc around the region. And so what they see with President Trump is someone who has articulated the danger posed by Iran and has made a commitment that the United States is going to stand with our allies in the Middle East to reduce Iranian influence. And so that's a huge deal deal for a country like Saudi Arabia. But this is really a culmination of a lot of good work they've done since he's taken office. They have a very good relationship with President al-Sisi of Egypt. Obviously, the Israeli relationship has improved. King Abdullah of Jordan, the UAE. So what you have is a pretty broad coalition, not only that can push back against Iranian aggression, but will be much more effective at fighting ISIS. Because when you talk about going into Sunni Arab parts of Syria or Iraq, a lot of those Sunni Arabs, they may not necessarily like ISIS, but if they see the United States, like it was under Obama, groveling towards Iran, well, they don't want to be dominated by a Shia power. So I think it actually is going to make the fight against ISIS more effective as well.
Well, isn't historically Saudi Arabia, aren't they, and Iran, aren't they historical enemies?
Yeah, it's a Sunni-Shia divide.
Right.
Saudi is basically the heart of Sunni Islam. Iran is the heart of Shia Islam. Yeah, Shia. And there's a natural fighting going on between them. And
how do you think Israel is looking at the fact that the president has chosen Saudi Arabia as a first visit, or is there a real realignment even in terms of Israel and some of the more moderate Arab countries?
The moderate Arab countries work with Israel. Now, a lot of it's behind the scenes because their populations don't necessarily accept Israel, but they do that because they realize it's in their interest to join with Israel, share intelligence, have military cooperation, because they recognize the threat that Iran poses. So I think from Israel's perspective, I think they've got to be very pleased with the posture that this administration has taken. Netanyahu came to Congress. I was there, raising the dangers with the nuke deal. Obama didn't listen to him. Now I think they have a partner, in addition to this coalition, that is on the same page in recognizing the Iranian threat.
All right, and I can't let you go, Congressman, without at least asking about the special counsel that was appointed this week by, requested, of course, by the Department of Justice. It's kind of interesting. I mean, for all the Obama years, special counsel and, you know, independent prosecutors, no one ever recused themselves. No one asked for or got an independent prosecutor. How do you look at the Department of Justice in light of what's gone on in the first couple of 4 or 5 months?
Well, you had the IRS targeting scandal. You had the Hillary scandal. Clearly deserved special counsels. That did not happen. The issue with this one is the order that was signed by the Deputy AG referenced Comey's testimony in March, in which he acknowledged the existence of a counterintelligence investigation. But as you know, Judge, that's different than a criminal case. And the regulations of the Department of Justice require a criminal matter before you do a special counsel. So I'm not even sure that the regulation was satisfied in this case. And it's interesting. You have a special counsel. What is the criminal offense that they are investigating? Nobody is able to articulate that, because links or coordination in and of itself isn't a crime. There's got to be a criminal object, and there's no evidence of any crime.
Exactly. Congressman Ron DeSantis, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thanks, Judge.
All right, and joining me now, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter and Fox News contributor, Judith Miller. All right, Judith, this is your area of expertise. What do you take away from this trip and the reception that our president has received in the Middle East?
Well, I think, Judge, Donald Trump may be under fire at home, but he received the royal treatment in the kingdom today. I've seen a lot of presidents come and visit. I have never seen a reception like this. The 81-year-old king meeting Donald Trump at the edge of the red carpet.
Right.
Everybody gathered there. This is an effort to reset a relationship which is crucial to the national security of our country, which has been ignored for the past 8 years by the Obama administration.
And Judy,
you saw the gratitude today for that.
Right. The president, Judy, could have chosen any country as his first stop on his first international trip. Why Saudi Arabia?
Because if you are fighting ISIS and you are trying to counter Iranian ambitions and aggression in the region, you want to be in the Arab country, which is the custodian of the two holy mosques, the symbol of Sunni Islam, the heart of Sunni Islam, to get the world's largest oil producer with 18% of proven reserves on your side. And that's what he did. The Israelis were a little uncomfortable, but they understood it.
Interesting.
They're second. This is a very important moment and a very important decision.
What do you think of the fact that the First Lady Melania Trump did not wear any head covering? Is that relevant at all? What does it say?
Look, I don't really think it is. I think, you know, Michelle Obama did not wear head covering under Sunni Islam, even in very Wahhabist, fundamentalist Saudi Arabia. Foreign women who are not Muslims do not have to cover their hair or wear a veil. When I worked there, when I was there for the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, I was not required to dress that way. I think as a woman, though, you have to be aware of the huge gap that remains still between Western human rights standards and that country. Even though they've made progress, they have a long, long way to go. But this trip is not about human rights. It's not about freedom of speech or expression. It's all about national security, about resetting this relationship and defeating ISIS. And the most important thing, Judge, that happened today, in my view, was not necessarily the $110 million worth of arms, but the creation of a joint effort to fight the message of radical Islamic extremism. Now, they're not going to use the word Islamic tomorrow in the speech, I believe, but make no mistake about it. The Saudis are partly responsible for the spread of this very pernicious perversion of Islamic ideology. They have to be part of the solution now. And their agreement to establish a center in Riyadh to help us with the messaging that will take people away from this perversion of the faith is hugely important, or as our president would say, hugely important.
And Judy, the Iranians today, you know, continue to have President Rouhani. I mean, they elected him. What does that tell us in terms of these the American and Iranian relationship, if any?
You know, I haven't been to Iran for many years because I'm banned. I haven't been able to get a visa because of my reporting. But the re-election by this very large and unexpected margin of President Rouhani is a very good sign for U.S. relations with Iran in the long run. And I know it makes the Saudis uncomfortable every time the United States reaches out and talks to Iran. But the fact of the matter is, Iran is a player in the region. They have to be watched carefully. They have to be monitored. Their adherence to the nuclear accord has to be monitored carefully. But they are a player in the region. You cannot ignore them. And I think it's a very positive sign what happened in Iran today.
All right, Judy Miller, always good to have you on, Justice. Thanks so much. My next guest was one of President Donald Trump's most outspoken supporters during the election. But now she seems to be wavering in her support. Have the liberals gotten to her? Conservative columnist and author of In Trump We Trust, Ann Coulter joins me now from, are you in L.A., Ann?
I'm in L.A.
All right, good. Now, has the West Coast, like, buried your brain somewhere in there? Well, listen, before I get to that, let's talk about Saudi Arabia. I mean, you know, when I was listening to my other guests, from Kellyanne to Judith Miller, I mean, we haven't seen anything like this. I can't remember seeing any. I was glued today to watching. I mean, the president's actually dancing with a bunch of men. I thought that was hysterical. What's your take on all this?
Well, although I would like him to concentrate on America and not cleaning up the Middle East. I mean, it's funny. Everything liberals attack Trump for, it's always what I like about him. They were making fun of him for, you know, when Obama went there, he had hummus. Trump is having steak and ketchup. I love that. I love that he's talking about, you know, making an arms deal for $100 billion. I think we can use some of that to pay for the wall. I like that that is what he's talking about. I like that his wife and daughter are not wearing headscarves. And also I like the fact that, you know, because he is a strong alpha male leader, that the Arabs respect him. They don't respect the beta male Obama. And you see that. He's getting a warmer reception. And in fact, they probably like that radical Islam stuff. I mean, they won't, I don't think they mind. MSNBC was going crazy on, they'll be so upset at the Muslim ban. Well, no, Saudi Arabia bans Christians. What do they care? They understand the idea of sovereign nations.
Well, and you know what's amazing, Ann, is the fact that, look, there are, many Muslims killed by ISIS, and, you got to be nuanced in this. When you peel back the onion a little bit, you realize, hey, look, if we can get the moderate states, if we can get, whether it's, Bahrain and the UAE, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, to fight the common enemy and get them to believe in us again, we all benefit. It's a realignment of the Middle East.
Yes, I think that's right. And also, it's not this, NATO or the UN going in. It's the United States dealing with the Arab countries, again, as separate sovereign nations. And we'll have their back, but they should be the ones to be fighting the enemies in their backyard, just as we should be fighting the enemies in our backyard, which brings us right back to the wall.
You and that wall, Ann. Maybe you ought to go down there and add a few bricks and mortar down there. But
I like that idea.
What do you think of the fact that the president has taken Melania? I mean, the appearance of, a family going there. We haven't seen that much of Melania. A significant message?
I'm not sure I like Melania. I think she makes a great first lady. I like that she isn't involved in policy like some other first ladies I could name.
And that's your answer?
Hillary Clinton.
I knew you were going there. All right, let's talk about the statement that you made about, although you still have hope in the Trump presidency, you're ready to jump ship. What's that about?
Not exactly. I mean, and by the way, not only have liberals not gotten to me, even when I'm annoyed with him, number one, I will never say it to liberals, though that Daily Caller interview, they did get a hold of it. And number two, as I wrote a few days later, every time I try to be mad at Trump, the media bring me back with some outrageous, completely unjustified, ridiculous charge against him. But in terms of the criticism, no, I mean, I think I'm exalting his main campaign promise, build the wall. And if his supporters don't keep the pressure on him to keep his campaign promises, well, then if he starts building the wall, the media, I think, could justifiably say, well, you're kind of a nut on this wall thing. Your supporters aren't even asking for it. So we are asking for it. That's why I keep posting the border wall update every day on my Twitter feed. Number of miles built today.
You'll never give it up. Ann Coulter, thanks so much for being with us this evening. Okay. And a fashion industry icon who is dressed Melania Trump joins me live in a few minutes to discuss all things FLOTUS style. First Lady of the United States, FLOTUS. But first, Matt Schlapp and Crystal Ball are here live in just a moment to debate the Trump media bias. Welcome back to Justice. Time for the panel on this extremely busy night of news, so let's get right to it. Joining me now, American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp and former Democratic congressional candidate and author of Reversing the Apocalypse, Crystal Ball. All right, guys, I have been glued to the television today.
Yeah. Wow.
And I will start with you, Matt. I mean, what do you take from all of this?
I didn't know Wilbur Ross could dance so well. I mean, I just
Wilbur Ross,
I couldn't.
the Commerce Secretary,
right? Stunning. You know, in American politics, you don't really wear the hat at the graduation ceremonies. You don't dance. You don't walk around with a sword. They broke all the rules, and it was really kind of cool because you could see the hospitality. Yeah. There was more. Saudi Arabia. Look, we don't like everything about Saudi Arabia.
No, we don't.
But they are sure happy that there's a new sheriff in town in America because they really want to work with us to defeat the extremists in Iran.
Okay, and so, Crystal, what do you say to those people who say, President Trump, he hates the Muslims and it's a Muslim ban and this, that, and yet you've got the most religious of Muslim countries greeting him like a king.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think you have to look at Saudi Arabia and say, this is our ally where we find the most distance between our stated values and our alliance with them. I mean, just in terms of their treatment of women,
right,
of their rule of law in the country, of their human rights abuses. And I think, frankly, that was an area where there was always a discomfort with President Obama because he was so aggressive and outspoken about human rights. And frankly, President Trump just hasn't put that front and center in the same way, from his welcoming the president of the Philippines into the White House, from some of his comments about strongmen around the world. So I do think there's more of a comfort level there.
I have to say this, being married to a Cuban American, that a lot of us didn't appreciate the president going soft on the murderous regime of the Castro brothers either. The fact is, Obama had plenty of blind spots when it came to human rights. And the thing is, Donald Trump, what he's going to talk about tomorrow, is about a pragmatic and realistic foreign policy. It's not about embracing everything that they do.
I'm curious about this, though. What is his foreign policy? Because
I think you're
I'm anxious to hear,
the whole world is going to be watching to say
what he said on the trail has been very different from what we've seen so far in office.
Look, this is what's fascinating about the whole week, about everything that happened in politics, and then look what's happening overseas. The fact is this. Yes, Donald Trump said a lot of things on the campaign trail, and actually he's the guy who the Muslim world and who Saudi Arabia realizes if they can forge a relationship with him, they can do business and they can get some stuff done for the world.
But they can do business, and they can also fight their historic enemy, Iran.
That's exactly right.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's
but,
exactly
the
right.
Saudis have been promoting this visit as the Arab Islamic American Summit. And, you can see, they've got the American flag along with the Saudi Arabian flag, and all of these allies that we never expected to be as receptive given the last 8 years seem to be back in the fold. But, Crystal, what do you think of whether or not this is going to inure to the president's benefit, or are the Americans and I won't categorize all of them, but the liberal media and the left, I mean, they're still going to be criticizing him?
Well, of course, but what I would say is this. I think that especially after the past week that he's had, the bar here is so low. As long as the president can get through these visits without provoking some sort of a major international crisis, I think he's going to get pretty good headlines out of this. Now, that little sugar high is only going to last for a very short period of time. Then he's going to have to come back here and come back to reality. But I do expect he'll get some good headlines out of this trip.
Well, and you know what, Matt? I really think that the Arabs, the Saudis, I think they respect power. Yep. They respect strength. They respect a businessman. They respect everything that Donald Trump is. And so they like the deal making. I mean, they're getting arms that they can fight their enemy with. And so, but at the same time, I wonder how Israel is looking at this.
I think that they're a little discomforted with the idea that he went to Saudi Arabia first. But I think they understand, because of all the rhetoric from the campaign and because we are fighting radical Islamic terror, that it's quite symbolic for the president to say, look, we've got a lot of differences. I'm going to show you the respect. This is the thing that the Saudis really didn't like about Barack Obama. They felt like over and over again he disrespected them. It's not the criticizing on the human rights. He didn't even call them and clue them in on things that they were doing in the region. They feel like they're going to get to have a restart with President Trump.
Crystal, last word.
Well, I think that it's a good thing for America to the extent that this trip is successful. So I'm cheering for the president's success. I hope he does not provoke any international crises.
I agree with you on that.
And we'll be excited to see him back home.
Matt Schlapp, Crystal, thanks so much for being with us tonight. Welcome back to Justice. The First Lady is making a splash with her trip abroad. And joining me now is someone who's been in fashion for 25-plus years, who has dressed not only the First Lady, but so many significant women in the world. There's a First Lady, from Oprah to Princess Charlene of Monaco, to Cindy Crawford, to Kellyanne Conway, and even yours truly. The president and proprietor of La Cheruboni, La Petite Robe, Anthony Vecchione, a fashion industry icon, and he joins me now. All right, good evening, Anthony.
Good evening, Judge. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you here. What did you think when you saw Melania in that black outfit? I mean, as we can see her here. Talk to me about
She is literally an absolutely beautiful woman. She has an amazing personal sense of style, and she precisely chooses these outfits that are appropriate for the occasions that she's being involved in. She is truly been a wonderful asset. She goes back to the great first ladies of Nancy Reagan, Jackie Kennedy. This beautiful gold belt gives it a beautiful modern look, and yet it still has a very demure, understated little effect to it.
And, you know, if you have to be covered, and although she doesn't have the headscarf, she's covered, her sleeves, her arms, her chest, everything is covered, and she chose a pantsuit, which is also very Western.
Well, she's actually very modern here because she actually chose a jumpsuit, and she has presented herself well in the culture that she's being, the environment that she's in. So as far as I'm concerned, she is truly an asset not only to the Trump administration, but to the White House.
Okay, and how do you compare her when you think about other first ladies?
Well, honestly, she moves with such grace. And the first ladies in the past that moved with such grace, Jackie Kennedy was absolutely one of them that we all love and adore. And I would say Nancy Reagan also.
Yeah, and women who love... Interesting. You see the necklace Nancy Reagan has on? Very much like the one Melania had on.
Indeed, which makes it very modern, yet still elegant without having to be too overdone.
Okay, and I think we have another shot of Melania in a long gown. Look at that.
Well, here she looks absolutely beautiful. I mean, she's actually, she's paying respect to the culture that she's visiting. She's covered up, but yet she's very, very elegant, modern, and she looks quite beautiful.
Do we know what she's wearing, Anthony?
This particular gown, I'm not sure of. I know that she was wearing a Stella McCartney jumpsuit earlier.
The black jumpsuit, yeah. Stella McCartney? What about that belt?
That's a Saint Laurent Python, really beautiful.
Yes,
she gave it a personal touch. She looks wonderful.
Yeah, she really does. And what do you expect, I mean, for the rest of the trip when she goes to Israel and she goes to Rome? And
I think she's going to shine on her own. I think she's going to let her own personal style come through, and depending on the cultures that she visits, she'll put her own identity and her own twist on it. I think she definitely has her own sense of style, though, which is truly beautiful.
And, you know, Kellyanne Conway was on earlier. She's talking about the fact that Melania speaks 5 languages, and I'm sure she'll be using some of them as she goes
Most
across.
Certainly she should be.
Yeah, and, you know, her height, she's got...
Well, she's a pure statuesque-looking woman. I mean, she has a presence when she enters a room, and she literally floats when she walks.
Yeah.
So she's really quite beautiful.
All right. And why don't you tell us a little bit about La Petite robes? So many of us wear them, including...
You are looking quite beautiful this evening in one, if I may say.
Yeah.
It's a company we started 5 years ago. I myself partnered with my designer, Chiara Boni. We're an Italian-based firm. And we came up with this concept for these women that are traveling and are moving all over the world. And for ladies like yourself and the other women that you mentioned prior. And it's been received so well. Within 5 years, we have managed to get on the bodies of the most beautiful, intelligent, entertainment, politically, I mean, just every woman we could possibly want.
And what I love about them all is that I can cut the hem with a scissor.
Well, that's what makes it modern. That's what totally makes it modern. It makes it easy to wear and travel, particularly.
Yes, tell me about
That's
it.
great.
And my friend Anthony Vecchione, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me tonight,
all
Judge.
right,
I appreciate
good.
it great.
That's it for us tonight. Remember, friend me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Judge_Jeanine. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget, tune in tomorrow for a special live Sunday edition of Justice at 9 p.m. where we'll have full coverage and reaction to President Trump's historic speech. Now, the best quote of the night when Anthony said that the First Lady floats, which is appropriate because she's FLOTUS. Get it? First Lady of the United States? FLOTUS floats. Am I going to get in trouble for that? Greg Gutfeld is next.